Welcome to the Holistic Wealth and Health Podcast. Your co-hosts, Jason Smith and Brian Bibbo, will inspire and teach you how to prosper in your mind, body, and spirit, not just your financial life. Joining forces with field experts, Jason and Brian are here to help you focus on what matters most in your life, living well.
Hello, and welcome to the Holistic Wealth and Health Podcast. And I'm your host, Jason Smith, and I'm here with Ed Coambs. Hi, Ed. Thanks for joining today.
Thanks, Jason. I'm excited to be here and for the conversation.
Yeah, for sure. And so let me give you a little bit of background on Ed. Ed is the founder, trainer, and therapy-informed financial planner at Healthy, Love, and Money. Ed, we met at a couple industry conferences, and I was so intrigued with what you're doing because, ironically, as we were just talking about, my daughter is on a path to be Ed Jr. one day. She wouldn't like me saying that. But anyways, but what I say that jokingly, but with some seriousness, because she's on a path to become a financial advisor, but simultaneously going to school to become a licensed mental health therapist. And so, Ed, when we met, I was blown away because I thought I had never heard of anybody doing that before. She's got a love and a passion for mental health and therapy and helping people. But at the end of the day, she really likes and enjoys the business and has an aspiration to become a financial advisor. So she was looking at marrying the two. And then I talked to you and I'm like, you got to be kidding me. It's exactly what you're doing.
Yeah. It's an exciting time in the world because both the rise of the profession of financial planning and the rise of therapy are both just really coming to the forefront. And so many more people's minds, they realize we need help with our finances. We got a lot of moving pieces and we need someone that can sit down and help us make sense of all these things that are going on. Oh, and by the way, I've got this depression issue. I've got this anxiety issue. I've got this PTSD issue. I've got a parent that's got an addiction issue. The combination is unique for each person, but there's just so many people that are waking up and realizing, man, I got to do something about my mental health and relationship health here. And so there's a natural intersection that starts to show up between these two places.
Yeah. And Ed, just to give everybody a little bit of background on you, because as I mentioned, I've never heard of anybody else doing this. I think it's just really great what you're doing. I've told my daughter for years, as a financial advisor, you're so much more than that. You're a life coach to them. You really are providing like life coaching, and it's very much like therapy. And I've said that to her for years. But your background, you've really gone all in with master's degrees in business counseling and financial planning. And you've had major publications like Wall Street Journal and CNBC that you've been published in. And I just love this platform that and I think it's therapy-informed financial planning is what you call it, right?
Yeah, it's the process that I like to call that we take clients through, right? And it really adds on to the conventional financial planning, which is looking at your cash flow, your investments, retirement, taxes, insurance, and estate planning. What I know is as soon as we start talking about any of those financial planning topics, we're going to trigger up patterns of thoughts, feelings, different behaviors, beliefs about ourselves, beliefs about other people, including our family members, that are all going to color how we negotiate or move through how much money to be spending or saving, what's happening with the retirement, how are our investments being managed. And the deeper reality is, okay, just getting one person to think through that is challenging, but then you get two intimate partners together who have their own unique set of experiences that color what they're doing. Man, it's a ripe opportunity for not seeing eye to eye and getting stuck in cycles of conflict.
No doubt. No doubt. And so, Ed, let me ask you some questions. What does it mean for couples to have effective financial intimacy, right? That's a term that I've not heard before that I think maybe you've coined it or picked it up, but what's it mean for couples to have that?
I would love to take credit for coining the term financial intimacy. It did exist before me, but I put it together and then I started looking for it and I found that some people had written on it, but very limited. But I think it's a fundamental concept if you're in an intimate partnership, right? I think most couples are familiar with emotional intimacy. Most couples have some concept of what sexual intimacy might be. But financial intimacy is about the ability to be safe, known, and transparent with your partner around the finances. And what I know is every human has both hopes, dreams, and aspirations, as well as fears, anxieties, maybe even places of shame. And those color the way we navigate money. But talking about them and being heard and cared about them doesn't happen. Because the follow-up question that I often ask clients when we're getting started on introducing this financial intimacy concept, I said, did anybody in your household, when you're growing up, sit down, look across the table, lovingly in the eyes and say, I love you, I care about you, let's talk about our finances together?
Yeah.
I've yet to have anybody answer yes to that question. Jason, can you answer yes to that question?
Believe it or not, my dad did. Not those exact words, but he did start teaching me that, if that's what you're referring to, right? A parent, right?
In a way that you felt loved and cared about.
Yeah.
Right.
I don't know. I don't know if it was a way I felt loved and cared about, in that it was more incentivized. Like my 13th birthday, he did this game where it got me fell in love with the market. I did a game with me for 13 weeks of picking stocks. And that kind of got me off to the races at an early age. And then he did have some money that was in each of our kids' names and turned that over to me to start taking care of. Now, unfortunately, I blew it. At a too young of an age, he turned it over. And sometimes you learn from your parents as much what not to do as what to do. I think the 13-year-old stock game was great. Turning over some finances to me at too young of an age at 21 was a bad move, because I ended up just blowing it.
Yeah. And I think I really appreciate you sharing those stories, because those are the stories that animate how we relate to and think about money. And I've yet to meet someone that doesn't have both some positive stories about money and some stories where they may regret, but they hopefully have learned some important lessons along the way.
Right.
But sometimes it's really hard to turn those painful experiences around money into meaningful life lessons that help you engage and re-engage in money. And I imagine you're a financial planner as well, so you're probably a lot more thoughtful and diligent about money now. But it was some of those early lessons that really have driven you to a level of mastery around money.
Yeah, 100%. And I'll share with you just a little bit more. You probably find it interesting. But so my dad did turn over some money to me when I was 21 years old, and I grew it to triple the amount of money that it was. And then because back then you still you can borrow money on margin, right? Against the holdings, right? And I was able to borrow dollar for dollar. Sure, I think the dollar amount was around 200,000 that I had in my name when I was 21 years old. I grew it to 600,000 in just a few years. And by trading the market, right? I thought I was a wizard, but in reality, the market was just crushing it. So anything, it was like closing your eyes and hitting a dartboard, anything would go out. And so I thought I was a genius at 23, 24 years old, tripled it to 600,000, then borrowed 600,000. So I had 1.2 million of holdings. And then the stock market started to tumble, right? This is 2000, 2001. And as it fell, I just kept doubling down, where I had the full 1.2 million in the market. And I never forget the day that I woke up. This was after I had a home I bought when I was 21. I borrowed all the money out of the home, and it was reversed. I had $50,000 that I got advanced on credit cards. So I had 50,000 in credit card debt. I was underwater on the value of my home. My lease was up on my car the next month. I woke up, I logged into the E-Trade account, and I had $7,500 left of the $600,000, right? Or what was originally 200. Neither did I know that the next year I would end up owing a bunch of tax, even though I lost all that money, because you know how that works. And so that's a whole nother story. But at that point, I cashed in the $7,500 account, and I went and I bought a 1997 Dodge Intrepid. And then I bought a stack of like names and phone numbers and addresses, and I started knocking on doors to try to get back to selling financial services products at that point at 23, 24 years old. dead broke. And I'm proud that I never filed bankruptcy, but I'm telling you what, like recovering from that was challenging and took years to get out of debt and climb my way back. So that's my, story, and I wouldn't trade it for the world. I'm glad it happened. I learned so many great life lessons from it, but I don't know that everybody would be able to come back from something like that.
One, you probably have worked with people that have really struggled to come back from something like that. I know that I have. When we have, I use the language of financial trauma,
Yes.
right? And that's a massive financial trauma.
Yes.
And it comes in this really important transitional time when you're young and innocent enough to believe you can do anything, but not wise enough to know when you're really headed into deep troublesome water.
Yes.
And when people have these really outsized positive first experiences, it gives them the overconfidence bias.
Yep.
And the overconfidence bias will lead to a crash at some point.
Yep.
Guaranteed.
What happened to me?
And the question then becomes, can you recover from the crash? And for some people, it does lead to major depression. It leads to chronic anxiety. It leads to, I got burned by this hot stove. I'm never going to do this again.
It's funny, Ed, because I never really thought about it, but I have been extremely conservative from like an investment standpoint ever since that.
Yeah.
And so I've been blessed that my businesses have done well and provided me with the ability to save. But at the end of the day, I've played it much more conservatively than I probably should have at early ages in my 30s and 40s, where I probably didn't take the appropriate amount of risk. And I am a financial advisor. But because of that trauma that I experienced.
That's exactly right. And I get to talk to a lot of financial planners about their life and their journey with money. And it's not something that we talk amongst professionals a lot about. But we all have these financial flashpoints. And this is where I think like financial planners are so much like therapists. I remember I went to school to be a therapist and they said in first graduate class, Ed, why are you here? I was like, no, I'm here to help people. Like, I mean, isn't that why people come here? And they said, no, why are you here? What do you need from this? And what they're really getting at is, what's your psychological pain and how resolved is it? Because you're coming to therapy to figure something out. And do you even know what it is you're trying to figure out? And I had no idea what I was trying to figure out. So I was in a lot of trouble. What I came to find out is some people had already been in therapy and figured out what their pain was and had gotten some resolution. And so they were like, man, therapy helped me so much. I'm ready to do this thing for other people. I had not yet had that experience. But I think the parallel is so many people come to the field of financial planning because they've had painful experiences in their childhood around money or their young adulthood, or maybe there's a lot of career changers. I'm sure you meet them too, right? People that are 40, 50 years old and they're like, I'm ready to do something different. I've had this challenging thing with money. I'm ready to do it. I want to know more. I want to help more people. I've overcome this. And so we're working out our own junk in becoming a financial planner as much as like I'm working out my own junk being a therapist, right? The cliche, I've got mommy issues. I've got mommy and money issues and I'm trying to work it out. All the love, mom, if you ever hear this podcast. But like psychologically, we want to try to figure out, we want to try to bring things to resolution. And so I think hopefully listeners can hear that it's okay if you've had adverse experiences around money. But if you're feeling stuck or frozen or you're not taking the risk that maybe you intellectually know you should, then there's that gap because of the emotional experience. And it's not a rational problem anymore. It's an emotional problem. It might even be a physiological body level problem. Nervous system locks up on you anytime.
Yeah.
You think about going like too close to too much equities in the portfolio.
You know what it is? I've overweighted myself in cash. And that's where and Ed, we kind of subscribe to this, or we do subscribe to a 3-bucket approach, now, soon, and later. And so the now bucket is your planned expenses, your emergency fund, that comfort fund, right? Everybody's got a number. You put your head on the pillow at night, you can sleep soundly if it's there. My number's way too big. I've sacrificed the rate of return that I could have otherwise earned if I would have invested that money. because of the trauma, right? That I
Yeah.
needed that big number there.
Yeah. Yeah. And these are the stories that I like to try to start drawing forward with folks and see if we can bring increased degrees of resolution so that they can enact what they know they should do, what they know is reasonable amounts of risk. Right. So it's not about saying, okay, Jason, let's get you back down to having, $500 in the checking account.
Right. Yeah.
Because, right, the financial planner would say, okay, do you have enough money to cover your living expenses for, let's call it 3 months? If it's 6 months, because that makes you feel better, great. But when you've got 3 years of cash on hand, what are we really doing? And this is, listeners, every person's scenario is a little different. That's why, like I say, 3 months, 3 to 6 months is that kind of classic financial planner, like rule of thumb. If you work in a high risk environment where it's very hard to recover work, maybe you need more money.
Right.
If you work in an environment where you've got pretty stable and predictable cash flow, you can probably slide that number down a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny, Ed, I was meeting with somebody many years ago, and actually I had my own little light bulb go on because I had always counseled people to have an ample amount of money in the now bucket.
Yeah.
And so they could just have peace of mind and invest the money in the soon and the later bucket.
Yeah.
And that still stays true today, but I'll never forget a husband and wife I was meeting with. It was actually the wife. And I said, what is that number? And we were going through the exercise to figure out how much should be in their now bucket. Went through their planned expenses, then started talking through this emergency or comfort fund and figuring out, dialing into what their number was. And the husband was like, I'd really like $100,000. That's the amount. Gives me peace of mind, blah, blah, blah. And the wife was like, $5,000. And he looked over at her. He's, what? And she's, honey, we have a home equity line. She's, I don't want to sacrifice the return we could use if we invested it. This is what we have our home equity line of credit for. And it was like, and this many years ago, but a little bit of a light bulb went on for me. Wow, yeah, that makes perfect sense.
And that's, I think the beauty of this work is when you do it long enough, you realize there's really a lot of diverse ways of skinning the same cat. And I think initially I wanted the right answer. This is the right amount of money to have, and it's universally applicable. Wrong answer. But I think what you highlight is that, like, risk aversion is a major financial planning concept, and couples can be in very different places about how they understand that. So let's just play this story out a little bit more, make some stuff up about this nice couple. She grew up in a financially secure family. She grew up relatively wealthy. Dad had a good job and then didn't want for anything. Meanwhile, he grew up with a single mom who struggled with debt, and the credit card debt really became crushing for her. And he's, no way in hell I'm ever going to play that debt game. But they don't really think about how these past experiences are shaping the way that they're thinking about managing cash. And how do we find some common ground around this simple, relatively simple thing of how much cash do we hold on hand? Now, and we know that if they're stuck on that, they're also going to be stuck on a lot of other topics. How much money to spend on vacation, how much money to spend on the kids' education, the list goes on.
Ed, I really am curious to hear you explain these 4 attachment styles that you talk about.
Yeah.
Help me understand a little bit more about that.
Jason, it all starts with monkeys.
Okay.
So for your listeners, just a little context. I got my MBA in CFP thinking that if I just know how money works, everything is going to be fantastic. And then I got that and I was working with clients, dash my wife, dash my family. And let's just say some things were working and some things were really not working. And I was like, I don't get it. I know all this stuff. This is what we should do. Why are we not doing it? Doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So roll back, these first impressions in grad school really stick in your head. So not only did they ask me, why are you here? What do you want out of it? But in the next class was this class called Advanced Developmental Psychology. And I'm a business guy. What is this? And then they show this video of monkeys. And I'm like, oh, now we've really gone crazy here. We're looking at monkeys. And I'm trying to help people with their money, and you want me to watch monkeys. So there's a famous study by Harry Harlow, and it's the rhesus monkey experiment. And that's really one of the highlights of how attachment theory came to be, which is what you're talking about. So in the field of psychology, they've been studying how humans Experiences of bonding and connection shape our sense of who we are and who other people are, especially in close caregiving relationships. This is the field of attachment theory. They saw with these monkeys is they would put them in a cage, and there would be a wire mesh mom with a bottle, and then it'd be a terry cloth, like washcloth, soft, soothing. And the baby monkey would go into the cage. They would go feed at the wire mesh mom, and then they would go over to the terry cloth mom and cuddle up. Right. Now, anybody that's ever raised kids knows what a baby wants after the bait.
Yeah.
They want to be held. They want to be comforted.
Yes.
That's attachment. That's bonding for the infant baby. Now, when you have that 18-month-old or 2-year-old and you don't look at them, what do they start to do? Mommy, daddy, mommy, daddy, mommy, daddy, mommy, daddy. Good, what do you want? They're needing bonding and connection. There's something that they can't meet. They fall and scrape their knee. They're looking to you. Are you going to come to me?
Yeah.
Or they draw a piece of artwork and they want to show you and they're proud. And if you're distracted, they become deflated. But if you respond and say, wow, this is so fantastic, they feel good. And so over the course of our whole adult life, we need interpersonal relationships to feel good about ourselves.
Yeah.
To feel safe, to feel connected. And if we have a handful of people that love us and care about us and do a good enough job, not perfect. Parents, please know there is no perfect parenting out there.
Yeah.
The research is very clear. No perfect parents. Don't even try. But the attachment research says if you get this kind of connection thing right about 30 to 40% of the time, you develop what's called secure attachment. It means generally you feel comfortable in relationships. Yeah. You reasonably expect that the other person will be there, that they'll do their best to try to understand you. If they don't understand you, they'll try to fix it and figure out what did I misunderstand and get back to a felt sense of being connected.
Yeah.
That sounds pretty nice, doesn't it? That's about 50% of our population. That means the other 50% of us are walking around with some degree of relational anxiety. And we really end up falling on one end or the other of the continuum. We've become preoccupied in relationships. And that means typically we don't feel so good about ourselves. We think emotional support is always outside of us. And we're always trying to get it, but we're never sure that we've actually received it. And even if we are receiving it, we're not really sure that we can trust it. So we're preoccupied with trying to get our emotional relational needs met, but we never really feel like the other person's getting us or wanting to be there, or they're doing it because it's out of obligation, not desire. So that's one end of the continuum. The other end of the continuum is more on the avoidant side of relationships. Now, there's relational anxiety here. It doesn't look like it because it's like you're the relational stiff arm person. I do me, you do you. I'm upset. No, I don't have any upset. I don't experience upset, especially not about relationships. You're upset. What's wrong with you? Get over it. They're dismissing of the value of close relationship. Great. They often see themselves more favorably than others because they've had to learn how to be self-reliant. They've learned through relational experiences over and over again that the people that are supposed to care about me can't care about me, won't care about me, are intentionally trying to hurt me. And the more extreme ends of abuse and neglect. And there's a fourth category called disorganized, and that's a small percentage, but it's 5 to 10% plus or minus. And they usually have some extreme combination of both of these types of experiences. But for me, when I think about a couple's ability to relate and connect around their finances, what I'm really thinking about is what's your ability to relate and connect relationally? Because money is about relationships. And if I have a relationship map in my brain that says relationships are not secure, they're not safe, they're not, that people can't understand me, man, that's going to be a much harder conversation to talk through. Do we keep $100,000 or $5,000?
Right.
If we go back and give this couple the benefit of the doubt and say they're both securely attached individuals, they might have been having this conflict, but they would then, with a little probing by the financial advisor, like he would say, hey, it looks like wife is saying 5,000, husband's saying 100,000. Tell me a little bit more. And they're like, oh, you know what? Okay. And they could get to some compromise. But if, one's more avoidant and one's more anxious, then the other, they're going to go in a circle about who's right. Maybe one's going to acquiesce to the other, but they're really resentful about it.
Yeah.
That's not an optimal outcome.
So those are the attachment styles. I think very interesting. Yeah. Makes sense though. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, and it's a lens for understanding humans and relationships. It's a very common one, especially in the field of couples therapy and family development. There's lots of academic research written about this. It's studied around the globe. There's international conferences on the topic. So this is not Ed's, let me just come up with some cool words about how people do relationships.
Yeah.
No, this is something that is researched extensively in ongoing ways within the field of therapy and broader psychology.
So Ed, if say my wife and I or the listeners want to do a little exercise amongst themselves to improve their financial intimacy, right?
Yeah.
Give us one. Give us an exercise that we can complete together.
Oh man, you had to ask that question. I'm glad you did. All right. A little earlier, I had set up that question of I don't have any people that will tell me, yes, my parents looked at each other in the eyes and said, I love you. Let's talk about our money together. And so the exercise is for you both to be sitting together in the same room, and you'll both be facing forward and turn and face each other. And just notice like how much anxiety starts to come up, even for you, Jason, as I'm talking about this, but thinking about others, right? And let's be real, this is not something I do with my wife like on a nightly basis. This is not like something you're going to do all the time. But what you want to test and see is, can we look at each other and make eye contact with each other? Because if you can make loving eye contact with each other, then you can move into the money conversation a little more easily. What happens is most couples do what's called a harsh startup. Meaning they make a snarky comment, they yell across the room, hey, honey, what was this charge at Amazon? And they might mean it like completely neutral, but their partner hears it as being criticized. Right. And so if they hear it as being criticized, what kind of response are you going to get? I don't know. I'm too busy. Or why are you asking?
Yeah, right.
And now all of a sudden, you're trying to make sure the household spending's under control and you're feeling defensive. You're like, dang it, I'm just trying to organize the finances. Why? I don't know why you're getting all bent out of shape about this. So that's not moving the needle forward. So if we can turn and look at each other and make eye contact and say, I love you. We're in this together. Can we talk about the finances? And just do that. Don't even try to get into any money topic. Just try that as an exercise and see what happens. If you're not able to do that, then there's very clearly some places of relational disconnection, likely some resentment, maybe some mistrust that's been built up. I was working with a couple recently, and we'd been working together, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, and they had been in conflict. And I said, so remind me again, what was conflict like for you and your family? And she said it so much more clearly than she had ever said it before. She said, my parents yelled at each other all the time. Oh, hey, I wonder why you have no idea how to have a calm conversation with your partner. Yeah. Because you've been conditioned to yell when things are not working. I don't know anybody that feels closer and more loved after they've been yelled at. I know people that feel a hell of a lot more angry or a hell of a lot more sad. And usually there's some combination of the two. They don't want to be yelling at their partner, but their brain literally has this program that says, when in conflict, yell. So that's part of the therapy, is to just have the experience, the opportunity to come into the relationship and to talk about something difficult without going to the, I yell now. And so some people have the automatic, I yell now. Some have the automatic, I shut down. Some have the automatic snarky comment, right? So we all have our kind of patterns. And this is why, like, at some point, most couples just give up talking about money because I already know where this damn thing is going to go. I've seen this show enough times. But it's like an old rerun of whatever your favorite sitcom is, like different episode, same storyline.
So it's that simple. You just tell each other you love each other and that you want to have a conversation about money and see what happens. Just let it flow.
Yeah, let it flow and see. And I don't think that there's no magic cures in couples therapy, right? It's a practice of turning and seeing. And if you're not able to turn towards each other, it's a real big sign that you probably need professional help.
Right.
to learn multiple other practices. You may need to do some grieving. You may need to do some assertiveness work. You may
Right.
need to do some mindfulness calming work. Depending on what your response pattern is, different activities will be more or less beneficial for you. And that's why working with a mental health professional can be so powerful, is they're doing that assessment of seeing, how is this person showing up? What's the most likely type of activities that will help them show up in a way that gets them what they actually want, right?
Got
Because
it.
as humans, we all have needs and we're trying to meet those needs. The question is, are we using more adaptive pro-relational skills, or are we using psychologically defensive skills that maintain a level of distance? Because what we know also is that couples maintain a level of homeostasis in how close or far apart they feel. Get too much closer, ooh, that feels uncomfortable. Too far apart, ooh, that doesn't feel right. And so there's this kind of intangible, like, this kind of absence makes the heart grow fonder, but how much
Yep.
absence does it take for your heart to grow fonder? For some couple, it's like you walked out of the door in the morning and the spouse is like, when are they going to be home? I'm missing them. That can be a really relationally anxious person. Someone else can leave for work, never say goodbye, be gone for 3 days on a business trip, not call home once, and be like, and come back home and be like, hey, honey, that was a great trip. And she's like, where have you been, dude? I thought I was just at the business trip, not worried about it. So, like, how much connection? And that's when we're not meeting that balance of connection and separation. That's where there can be some real challenges.
Ed, you talked about the being yelled at, right? Or
Yeah.
arguing type of scenario, or being yelled at about money. It's fine. I just read an article statistic that I thought was really interesting, that they did a long-term study of all these children that grew up in households, and then whether there was arguing in the household or not,
Uh-huh.
right?
Yep.
Whether the parents argued.
Yep.
And then the long-term effects where the parents argued in front of the children, or households where the parents never argued in front of the children.
Uh,
And what blew my mind is substantially higher levels of financial success and just overall, like, career success for the kids whose their parents argued in front of them. The difference was, though, is whether the arguments were healthy and spiteful, or constructive, but even heated sometimes, but
yep.
constructive.
Yes.
And it was the theory behind why more children ended up being more successful by the parents arguing, was they learned that skill of, like, debate and standing up for themselves and having that kind of
Mhm.
healthy conflict. Because in my opinion, I've always believed conflict is healthy.
Yeah.
Amongst my executives of my
Yeah.
companies, I promote healthy conflict. I think it's how you come to the best conclusions. I think a
Right.
lot of times it's those couples that never talk about it, but
Yeah.
have deep contempt for each other. And then
Mhm.
they end up divorced out of nowhere. You're like, they were happy. They never argued, right? It's funny because I
Yes.
shared that with my wife. Yeah, we do. We argue in front of the kids. Like, we don't scream at each other. We're not disrespectful, but we
Right.
argue about stuff. And one of the things about money
Yeah.
is for whatever reason, not to go into all the childhood stuff, but I can't stand when things aren't taken care of, right? Like,
Uh-huh.
it drives me even waste of food, waste of,
Ah,
like, letting things get run down, breaking them, not
okay.
maintaining them.
Yeah.
Just can't deal with it. And her and I do have healthy
Uh,
conflict and debates on that kind of thing.
yeah.
And now I feel better that it happens in front of the kids. I'm like, see, honey, it's okay when you argue in front of the kids. They're going to be better for her.
Well, I do think you really actually highlighted such an important point. And it's fun to have these types of conversations because I am a conflict avoidant individual. I grew up in a low overt conflict household. There's a low boil of passive aggressive conflict directed from my mom to my dad. My dad never directed no awareness of any conflict, any ill feelings my dad ever had towards my mom. But my mom would lob these little one liners here or there. And either my dad was never around to hear it, or if he was, it just right over his head. And that taught me something really powerful, not intentionally, but it taught me that it's not okay to say anything. It also taught me, like, that's how people treat you. And so like when conflict arises, I shrink back, I get scared. And I do think in order to be successful, you are going to create conflict, not because you're looking to, but because you're bringing different ideas to the market. And mature adults will bring their own ideas and challenge ideas. And that's psychologically healthy, right? Because that's how we do get to the best ideas. But if we feel threatened by other people challenging our ideas and we don't have the right relational skills to work through that in constructive conflict, then we go into destructive conflict. And that's what people are afraid of, right? That's the toxic conflict. That's the name calling. That's the belittling. That's the shaming. That's the black and white. You're never. And that cripples people, right? But when you can talk through something and maintain a sense of, I respect you, you're a human worthy of love and respect, even if I disagree, and the kids can see, or in the corporation also, because look, corporations and families are almost the same thing. Okay, yes, I know corporations are designed to make profit and benefit the shareholders, and families are, to raise kids and create a loving unit. But we're being humans, whether we're in a family or we're in a corporation. Either way, like we've just got to navigate each other.
Right.
And I think being on a journey of continuing to explore how to do healthy conflict is imperative. And knowing that we have different models for conflict. And I'm sure you've seen this as a leader and you've heard stories from people that you're leading. Jason, man, I don't know what to do with conflict. Like it scares me.
Yeah.
Or Jason, like conflict is, it gets too heated. And so again, we have these barometers for what feels comfortable. And that's where if we can be flexible with that and know our style and know the other person's style. And so conflict styles are something that are related to attachment styles, but it's distinctly different.
Yep. Makes sense.
Yeah.
Ed, I think this was super helpful. I feel like I just had a therapy session. Thank you for that. I was still aliens. Just kidding.
Yeah.
No, this is really helpful, Ed. And I know our listeners are going to love it. And I can't thank you enough for spending time with us here today.
Yeah, Jason, I appreciate you sharing your community with me and a chance to talk with folks. My mission and the mission at Healthy Love and Money is to foster relational connection around money. And in that way, I think we share something very similar. Your work is about helping people navigate money together.
Yep. Absolutely. All right. Thank you all for listening, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
Thank you for listening to the Holistic Wealth and Health Podcast. We hope we inspired you to make changes so you can live your best life. If you want to find out more about what we do, or if you want to have a holistic wealth and health financial plan, please call 456-833-7000. Please subscribe to the podcast and share it widely with your friends and family. Financial planning and advisory services are offered through Prosperity Capital Advisors, PCA, an SEC-registered investment advisor with its principal place of business in the state of Ohio. J.L. Smith Holistic Wealth Management and PCA are separate, non-affiliated entities. PCA does not provide tax or legal advice. Insurance and tax services offered through J.L. Smith Holistic Wealth Management are not affiliated with PCA. Information received from this podcast should not be viewed as individual investment advice. Product discussions and illustrations are hypothetical in nature and will vary based on many factors, including, but not limited to, age, health, product, insurance carrier, and product design. You should consult the insurance carrier website and policy for detailed information. For information pertaining to the registration status of PCA, please contact the firm or refer to the investment advisor public disclosure website, www.advisorinfo.sec.gov. For additional information about PCA, including fees and services, send for our disclosure statement as set forth on Form ADV from PCA using the contact information herein. Please read the disclosure statement carefully before you invest or send money.